Thanks for joining us this week. We're going to have a conversation with Sarah Zemekiel and Ansuya Bisbee, our two MCPS RISE participants. RISE is a program where MCPS places their students in businesses, nonprofit, and government organizations. Since this program began in 2017, MCPS has placed over 4,500 students, and our county government has hosted over 260 of these students. For the past 4 summers, we've hosted RISE students in the county executive's office, and we love having these students spend their summer with us. We learn as much from them as they do from us. We appreciate their assistance and insight with our operations. Before we begin the conversation, I'd like to ask Sarah and Ansuya to introduce themselves, tell us what high school they attend, and share why they decided to work with us in the county executive's office. So I turn it over to you.
My name is Sarah Zemekiel. I'm a rising senior at Bethesda Chevy Chase High School. I did this last year with Scott, and I really enjoyed it. I really wanted to repeat it this summer to keep consistency and also continue to learn more what goes on in our government in Montgomery County.
Cool.
I'm Ansuya. I'm a rising junior at Richmond Montgomery High School, and this is my first year. And I wanted to do this because I'm really interested in government, and this was kind of an opportunity to get an experience and, like Sarah said, to see what our county does.
Have fun?
Yes.
Good. So what issues do you and your peers talk about or think about these days? There's a lot going on in the world. So I'm just curious, what's on your minds, and what do you think the biggest problems are? What do you think we ought to do about it?
I think now the political climate is really heated, especially with the election coming up. So that has been a really big topic with our peers because at least people my age are going to be able to vote now. So the opinions are really varied, rather than before when the election was during COVID, especially during the era of Black Lives Matter. I feel like opinions were super divisive, because they didn't really agree with one side for very specific reasons. But now, people are beginning to dislike both ends and are having trouble what to choose. That's something very common within my peers now.
That's tough.
Yeah. Even when our morals typically align with one side, it's kind of hard to choose them. At least for some people, it's a difficult choice to make when they don't agree with everything that they're doing, and whether they're gonna put which morals as a priority for them.
That is a really tough dilemma. You're never going to find somebody who's 100%, and we have to make choices all the time. I'm pretty progressive Democrat. I've voted for people who are a lot less progressive than I like because I'd rather make as much progress as possible than cut off my nose to spite my face and not contribute to making any progress. But it's tough to have to look at the world that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you?
For me and my peers, there's so many issues we care about. There's, like Sarah said, there's so many things going on. There's school shootings, there's climate, there's reproductive rights. I think for me personally, I'm really involved with fighting for reproductive rights, just because as a woman, I think we should have the right to do what we want with our body. So I go to rallies, and at my school we organized a walkout, and I'm involved with different youth organizations. So yeah.
Yeah. I think this year I found it very refreshing actually to see a lot more protests happening than the previous year. I feel like now with the internet, we've become so used to performative activism, and showing your place in an issue was just by posting. But I think now even when you're looking at these colleges and these students protesting, it's something that we haven't seen in a long time, and I think it's refreshing to see because it feels like there's actual action with the youth. And I think it's something that's been repeated in history a lot. The youth always either somewhat breaking rules or being a little bit more rebellious. But I think that eventually that's what makes changes, and it's good to see that coming up again.
So I grew up in the 60s in a very rebellious time. And the big issues were the war in Vietnam and civil rights. I went to my first demonstration when I was in 1961. So I was probably 11 years old because it was not November. So if it was before November, I would have been 11. And I was at King's March on Washington in '63. And I already had pretty hardened views on the war and on civil rights, and felt that, we were not making progress. The country was fundamentally racist. We had no business in Vietnam, and there are a lot of students who felt that way, but not all students felt that way. But we saw with the student movement over time, the number of students came to see the world very different than the way they were raised. The 50s were a very conformist period. The big emphasis was on conformity and accepting. So we accepted racism in society, accepted sexism. There wasn't much pushback against those things, at least not broadly in society. All the major institutions, I felt, lined up on the other side of those questions.
Mm-hmm. To our next question,
Yeah.
Did you always grow up in this area, in the DMV area?
I grew up in D.C. till I was about 10.
Okay.
In the Northwest, I went to Whittier Elementary School. And then we moved to Silver Spring off Forest Glen Road.
Yeah, that's why I found it interesting. You went, with your activism and stuff, you kept it in a very particular area, obviously here. And do you find it, fond of helping, where you're from grow, politically, or?
So I felt, I thought we had two newspapers back then that were real newspapers, which is better than what we have today. And, I felt I could get a lot of information, and my parents and their friends talked about political issues, not just political in terms of parties, but they talked about civil rights, they talked about the war, they talked about any number of things. Mm-hmm. Labor was a big topic in my household. Mm-hmm. So I heard a lot of that. I had some friends who came from very conservative households and had no idea what I was talking about. And I had other friends who had backgrounds similar to mine, and those friends you could have more conversations with. But it's I was exposed to it when I was really young, younger than most of my friends were, and I thought it was helpful. The first thing I remember seeing was my father worked in the post office, and I'd look at all these stamps from Africa, and all the stamps from Africa had kings and queens on them, white kings and queens. Mm-hmm. And I was looking at that, and I remember asking him, why are all these white kings and queens on these stamps in these African countries? This is when I'm 8 or 9 years old. Mm-hmm. So I got a really early lesson in colonialism, that these were all occupied countries by Europeans. And that was one of the things that I also thought was incredibly unjust. So you put that together with civil rights and Vietnam War, and it was a pretty formative brew that I was growing up in.
So that is what inspired you to go forth and running for. I remember Scott was telling us about how you were taking position in places in Tacoma Park and stuff, and what brought you to that. Or?
So when I started actually at University of Maryland, with some friends of mine, we created a political party that actually took over the student government, actually won an election, actually controlled the presidency and the legislature, and we were mostly commuters instead of Greeks. Mm-hmm. And we were more of the progressive students on campus. So I started, getting involved, because we realized we were dealing with the school administration, we had the student assembly, that was the vehicle to get issues in front of people. So as I got older, I got involved not actively in politics, but actively in issues for a long time. And I was involved in work. I was working in a food co-op that was worker-owned, worker-managed. And we went to a conference, and we met these people in Minneapolis, and they were community organizers. And they were telling us about how they had worked for a political candidate. And then when the political candidate was elected, and they provided most of the people on the ground for him, that they thought the candidate was going to support them on their agenda. And when they met with him, he said, well, I've got a lot of other interests I have to take care of. And he didn't support them at the end of the day. So they said their lesson was that instead of supporting people who don't share our values, hoping they'll do the right thing, we should find people among us who want to get elected and be people we could trust to, do what we say. So I was, like I said, I was working in the co-op. I was in Tacoma Park. I got involved in Tacoma Park politics. I got elected to the city council there because I felt, I see the same thing today. People have public hearings. Everybody knows that no one's listening to the 2 minutes of testimony. It doesn't change a lot. People hand over documents that don't get read, but you have your 2 minutes of public pro forma testimony. And they said, you really need to be on the other side of the dais. And I decided I wanted to be up there listening to people and being able to ask questions and hear what they had to say. I didn't want to just be in the audience, give a speech, and then know nothing was going to change.
Yeah. So what do you think about this new age of activism? Do you think that it's not, since it, like I said previously about performative activism,
Yeah.
do you think that there's the passion in like the youth is becoming less and less because of maybe cancel culture or?
Whew. I mean, you've got issues that we didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
Like social media is just a giant swamp.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it can be used so much to harass people and to twist and distort things, and people present things that aren't true, and people can't tell what's true and what's not true. So I think that's really hurt or confused activism to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
But I like seeing the number of groups that are actually active. Montgomery County, in MCPS, you have bunches of student groups who work on social justice issues, environmental issues. When I was growing up, there weren't any. Mary Perg, which is a big deal. Today the Pergs have been around for almost 50 years now. There were none of those groups when I was growing up. So you didn't have models of community organization. You didn't have people protesting environment. Vietnam War was a catalyst,
Mm-hmm.
but it was a catalyst against the war, not necessarily about a philosophy for some people. So it's very different. I'm glad to see so many students involved now.
And one big difference between, I think, your generation and ours is the rise of AI. So I kind of wanted to ask, so AI, I feel like, is kind of encouraged now in the professional field, but in schools it's very heavily restricted. So do you think that schools should find a way to help students utilize it, or should it be like completely restricted?
So I'm sort of in the in-between world on this. I mean, I think it's a great tool. I use it for research, but it's also not necessarily 100% accurate. And so I've read things that were just patently untrue. And I actually read an author's story about him asking AI who he was. He didn't say, who am I? He just said, who's this person? And the AI first told him who he was. He asked the question again, and then it said, you died 5 years ago. That person died 5 years ago. And he's like, I'm not dead. And so, it's. I don't think there's enough fact checking. There's some AI apps that provide references. Some do not provide the kind of references you need.
Mm-hmm.
And in school, I'd worry about. I mean, you actually have to know what you're being taught. At the end of the day, you've got to walk away and have learned something. And if you can possibly just go into your phone and answer a question by using your phone, you might get the right answer. But you haven't learned it. All you did is look at it and write it down. And those things, that worries me, because you may think you're learning, and your parents may appear that you're learning. But if you haven't really learned it and you just copied what you read off of a phone, that's not real learning. And you're not going to be well served by that.
Yeah.
But they should show you how to use it, because they could teach you how best to use it as a tool. It would be a really good tool for you to know about. It is really powerful.
Yeah. I know at least for my school, like, especially English classes, they are very strict with using AI. They don't want any students using it for plagiarism, especially since it doesn't just have the power to find information, but also complete, like, paragraphs for you, fix up, like, documents. It's almost like the skills that you learn throughout high school is not necessarily needed if something else can fully correct your grammar or cite everything for you.
But it's not. You're not always going to have that.
Yeah.
And this is where, when I was teaching, it was like, oh, kids don't need to know math. They're going to have computers and Your kids don't need to learn how to spell because they're going to be able to look it up on a phone. When you're standing at a grocery store and you're trying to figure out how much per ounce is something, or you're trying to figure out what are the ingredients of the label and you can't read it, you know, you really need to have those capabilities in yourselves. So as you think about things, like what do you think about what you want to do with your lives?
I am not 100% sure. I definitely want to maybe eventually work in the government, but till then, I really am eager to hopefully go to law school if everything goes as planned. I've always been interested in government, and I always enjoyed those classes about history, government, and English. I never found that much interest with math as much, unless it has to do with like real life. I did like word problems, but I always enjoyed English and like history lessons. So, and also I'm very eager to help people. I feel like I want to have some sort of fulfillment in my job. I know not all lawyers are like there to help people, but hopefully if I am my goal is to work with people. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm also not sure exactly what I want to do yet, but I'm interested in, working in the government or working in the legal field, or, working with other countries. So I also want to go to law school. That's a goal for me. But, this is another reason why I'm doing RISE, because I kind of want to gain insight into different jobs and like kind of see what I want to do in the future.
So you haven't picked majors yet then?
Yes, we're too young.
You are. I went to college. I started in '67, I guess. I had classes I did not want to take, but I had to take, like you had to take a math class. And when I was in high school, I never tried to get straight A's. That was just like, if I didn't want to do the class or I didn't think I'm going to use the information, I'd figure out, what do I do to get a C? And I would take the C because I wasn't going to do it, like in calculus. It's like, I couldn't figure out how I'd use it. So it was like, do I really want to torture myself and learn it, or just put my time into something else? So, but we all make different choices. I think later when I was teaching, I used math a lot. And I realized like how powerful it was, because as a teacher I realized it's a logic tool. It helps. You have to know what operations you're going to use, and you have to understand the sentences they give you. So it was like, it was much cooler when I was a teacher than when I was a student. But I never left, when I left college I had no goal in terms of employment. I just wanted to do something that would change the world, but I didn't know what it was going to be.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely don't enjoy like science or math too much, but I think now, like, especially with college and just like, there's so much pressure, and I feel like now everything's more competitive, so I definitely like just put the minimum effort that I need to get a good grade into those classes, but I think nowadays, like, there's a lot more stress with academics, so.
Do you feel more pressure in school?
For sure, yeah, especially with everyone around me is like, they're getting so much experience, they're doing so many extracurriculars, and now it's pretty, like, I feel like having a 4.0 nowadays isn't the same as it used to be. Like, I feel like now it's pretty normal to have a 4, like, it won't blow anyone away if you tell them you have a 4.0, especially with college. I know, Sarah's applying soon, so I'm not sure how that is, but.
Well, yes, my school is very competitive academically, but I feel like as a whole, at like my school, I think it's been really influenced by social media with these decision pages. Like, you are kind of pressured to like want to show off to people that you're going into a good school, and like a lot of my peers who were now not seniors anymore, but they didn't get to go to the schools that they wanted to because of the expenses, and like posting about going to like your state school that wasn't College Park, it was considered kind of embarrassing at our school. Even community college, even though that's like the best the best financial decision, it's looked so down upon with my peers. So
That was true when I was growing up here. Montgomery College, which is now probably the best community college in the country, didn't have the reputation. So if you went to Montgomery College, that was like the last place you would go. And I didn't want to go to the University of Maryland because wasn't, didn't have any reputation, at least not in the stuff I was interested in.
Mhm.
But I did not worry about my grades. I think I was happy. I think I went up to 3.6, and that was good enough for me.
Mhm.
My C in algebra didn't help me.
Yes.
But what do you think of professions, or do you think of like learning? Do you want to learn more before you pick a profession, or you talked about being a lawyer?
Yeah, I feel like I feel like since now in Montgomery County, the schools don't really have, like, we are all like paved in a pathway to college. I don't think there's any like career readiness at my school in terms of like, ROTC. They used to have in some schools, and like cooking classes, like culinary classes, and just like workshop trade classes. Like, we are not exposed to that at all, and I feel like that could be useful to a lot of students who their like pathway to life isn't always going to
Right.
college, and there are still other ways to be successful.
I agree. Do you feel the same thing where you are?
Yeah, I mean, I've never really thought of a pathway that isn't going to college. And I've never really had an interest in like being a business owner or doing something like that. So for me, I definitely want to learn first, go to college, and then kind of figure out where I want to go from there.
Do you feel like your peers, you have peers who you don't feel like they're well served by a curriculum that only points them to college and doesn't prepare them for anything?
Yes, I actually do. I feel like there's a lot of students who don't really have that much guidance at home, even with like the be prepared for college. So if they don't even like the path that they're going to, and they don't have the expenses like to even pay for college,
Right.
because if you're gonna pay a full tuition, in-state tuition for UMD, it's $29,000 a year.
In state?
Yeah, in-state. If you live at home, if you commute, it's
Yeah.
cheaper, but
Right.
if you're not commuting, it's 29,000.
My annual tuition was $725 in Maryland.
I feel like the rate of how much we're getting paid, compared to how much everything is becoming, like the prices, is
Mhm.
just not aligned with each other anymore. So, of course, you were once a kid before, and I know you have interest in music, so is there any music suggestions you have for us now that maybe adults didn't like then, but you guys like when you were younger? I feel like that's always going to be repeated with the youth, like the adults never like our music.
But people were horrified by rock and roll when I was growing up, because they thought it was going to be the end of society, and it would lead us into some deep dark path. But I played in a band from when I was probably 14 or 15 till I was in college, and I did open mics after that for a while, and I really liked it. But I played a lot. Played Dead. We played, some pop songs, Jefferson Airplane, more the more psychedelic version
That's
of music back in my time. Beatles songs,
Mm-hmm.
which is less psychedelic but poppy, but really, really good pop. And
Yeah.
and folk music, which is probably the first stuff I learned, was folk songs. And I even have an autographed album from Peter, Paul, and Mary, signed by Mary.
Oh,
And I think
love Peter, Paul, and
and that was at a concert at Carter Barron in probably 1960. But I've always liked music, and
good.
even now, I know a lot of the bands around here. I go out and listen to, particularly blues music and some of the rock music that's out.
That's good. So you still try to keep up with the music that are coming out now?
Yeah,
That's good.
and I've got grandkids, and so my grandkids expose me
That's
to
good.
some of that. But I have a granddaughter is actually playing guitar, and I was amazed she plays guitar better than I ever learned to play guitar.
Mhm.
And she's like 15 years old, and it's
That's
kind of
cool.
cool. But she's learning some of the music that I grew up with, but also doing a lot of new music.
I used to play guitar when I was younger, so a lot of my instructor was a little bit older, so we did do a lot of Peter,
Paul, and Mary.
Peter, Paul, and Mary. I remember doing the Magic Dragon.
Puff the
the Magic Dragon.
Indeed,
Yeah.
yes, that was a required song. If you had a folk guitar and you were acoustic guitar and you were
Yes.
playing, you had to do Puff. Do you play any musical instrument?
I used to play the guitar also when I was younger. It was off and on. Like, I moved to Thailand for 2 years, so I had to start again. And then when I moved back here, I kind of never learned again. Like, my guitar's just sitting in the back of my room. I also played the violin in middle school, but I kind of stopped that too. So I don't know if music's my thing, but I definitely like listening to music. So
I like listening to music. Hopefully, you guys had a good summer,
Yes, I did.
and I'm glad you came back again.
Thank you. I'm glad
And
to be
hopefully
here.
you'll come back again. What's your favorite? What's your, if you think about anything that's your favorite thing to do here, or a highlight of what you do?
My favorite thing to do here, of course, I enjoyed this stuff. I also just like accompanying like Scott and everybody else in the office, like Joe and Teresa. It's fun. It's also it's interesting to see how adults actually like interact with each other. I feel like I only see teachers and they don't really talk to each other at school, so this is just a whole different world for me.
It's a colorful environment. How about you?
I mean, I think like before coming here, I was definitely scared about how the office dynamic would be, like how nice people would be and how like I would get around the office, but people are very nice here. I think my favorite part is just kind of going behind the scenes of events. Like I was behind the scenes of your Rise interview. I got to see the police chief get sworn in, the firefighter chief. So I think like working with the public information office, it's nice to see the media side of things of this office, and yeah, that's probably my favorite part.
So you got to listen to people talk about how to shape messages.
Yeah.
So- and you can learn that and use that in the work you want to do.
Yeah.
How do you become persuasive? That's the challenge.
Yeah.
But I just want to thank you for doing this, and it's been fun having you guys around.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks.